Cerne Abbas, a sleepy village in rural Dorset, and home to the famously enigmatic, baton-wielding and very nude chalk giant. For centuries, people have speculated on his pagan symbolism and meaning. But only a couple of hundred metres from his feet lie the remains of a lost Benedictine abbey, the rediscovery of which could help reinterpret the iconic landscape around it. The abbey was founded in 987 AD, which is right in the middle of a date range experts now believe the big man himself was carved into the hillside. But what did it look like? And could these two very different landmarks be more intrinsically connected?
But of course, what would be really nice is if we could find a nice ceramic tile with the giant on it.
For the last 2 years, Time Team have joined archaeologists on site as they pick through the destruction of the Dissolution.
Surely to goodness that comes from the Abbey.
Piece together an architectural treasure lost for 500 years.
That is not lead. It is.
Wow! And reveal tantalising clues.
Well, I wasn't expecting that.
That could take us back to the time of an Anglo-Saxon saint. And perhaps even the origins of the giant itself. The site is located on the northern edge of Cerne Abbas village, in the rolling Dorset Hills, just 8 miles north of Dorchester in southern England. It sits on an estate once owned by the eminent 19th century archaeologist General Pitt Rivers, although surprisingly, he didn't ever excavate here himself. It's July 2024, and the team have just begun their second month-long excavation. In a campsite behind the vicarage, I'm parking up and getting ready to join them on site. Welcome to Cerne Abbas.
What's that, Dora? If in doubt, shout.
The dig's being run by the University of Sheffield's Dr Hugh Willmott.
No, it looks like a bit of glazed roof tile on me. It's lovely.
With the Cerne Abbey Research Project and local volunteers from the Cerne Historical Society.
Let's see if we can fit in a box. Ta-da!
Although historically, it was recognised that the Cerne Abbas Abbey must lie somewhere nearby, not least because of the name, the exact location had remained a mystery. Back in 2022, Hugh began a hunt for the missing abbey. If the site was lost, what made you go into that field there?
I looked at the map and I thought, well, really, it was the only logical place you could actually fit as large a complex as a monastery. Quite where in there, I didn't know, to be honest, but it was a good candidate.
Hugh's geophysics revealed an incredible first glimpse of the abbey complex.
I did radar and we saw for the very, very first time a really clear image of the monastic precinct and could pinpoint where the buildings are and place it back into its setting.
The images were so vivid that the cloister area and many of the abbey walls could be seen as recognisable outlines. From these impressive results, in 2023 the team decided to open up 2 ground truthing trenches over some of the structural features and identified just how much of the archaeology still remained in the ground.
So we put one trench over the corner of the cloister where it joins the church, so we could see the relationship with different buildings. And then we put a much smaller trench towards the east end of the church to try and locate where the outer wall was, because we could then properly orient the church and make some sort of estimations about its size and that sort of thing.
Time Team were on site as they uncovered parts of a wall and cloister corner, including an intact tiled surface.
Oh, look at that! That's spectacular. I've never cleaned a medieval floor before.
They also discovered parts of an altar.
I mean, it's pretty in your face and garish.
Well, it is, but it would be sort of painted like this all over.
These stunning pieces of medieval architecture offered the first clues as to how this once glorious and very rich abbey was decorated.
So this is a ridged tile, glazed deliberately to catch the sunlight. Even the boring old roof has been blinged up to sort of be decorative as possible.
They also found the remains of one of the monks buried under the cloister walkway. But although hugely successful, the dig didn't find any evidence of earlier Anglo-Saxon structures linking the site directly with the dating of the giant. So in July 2024, Wessex Archaeology conducted some more targeted geophysics to try and get some even clearer results.
So there's been quite a lot of geophysics done on site over the past few years, but you've come back this year with a new system, high definition radar. Can I see your new data set then?
Yeah, absolutely. The extra definition it adds is incredible. And it's allowing us to, especially where we're not going to get to excavate, help us fill in that story of the site at a much higher resolution. We can see bases of columns, we can see individual buttressing on walls, and we can see a lot more detail in things like internal partitions.
That is pretty impressive, isn't it? Wow, that really is nice.
Armed with all of the 2023 discoveries and these new geophysics, Hughes opened up 2 more trenches for the 2024 season. The first is towards the western end of the Abbey church and cloister, and a second over where Hugh believes some of the more domestic buildings like the infirmary, refectory or brewhouse could be. Both trenches also offer the possibility of finding earlier features. It's early days of the first week, but the team are beginning to find their way past the heavily demolished and robbed out layers.
So Hugh, here we are in Beaver Field, and this is where you had that amazing geophysics. What have you got going on in this field?
It's a bit further away from where we were digging last year, so we're at the west end of the monastic church with just a little bit of the cloister there as well. It's been completely demolished at the Dissolution in the 16th century, so almost all the walls and stone have been robbed away. But what we're finding is kind of the remains of where the walls were, and hopefully we'll start finding things like floors and surfaces and other exciting things.
But it looks like there's some fairly nice bits down by the trench side here.
Yeah, this is just stuff that was mixed in with the rubble, so we've got bits of architecture. That's a piece of Purbeck marble, and that's one of the decorative elements of the abbey. We've got bits of sort of early post-medieval pottery, which perhaps relate to the period of demolition.
So that's the rubble sorted, but of course, as an archaeologist, I am drawn to the trench view, and I can see that you're actually starting to get into some of the features there.
Well, this is our first really clear feature. This dark patch that then turns at a right angle and goes off under the section there. That's the robbed out arcade wall of the cloister, and this is the wall that would have had windows in it. And then on the other side, we've got the walkway where the monks would have gone around.
And is that white patch there, is that a part of the floor that would have been going around the cloister?
It is. It's basically a mortar bedding for a sort of tiled or possibly a stone flagged floor. The stones or the tiles have been robbed away, but we've actually got the rest of the floor surface there.
This is the last phase in what Hugh thinks will be layers of floors built up over years of the Abbey's life.
And that side of the trench there, it looks to be, what, a foot lower than this half?
Well, over there is the main body of the church. We're just getting the top of a very jumbled wall, which may well have some in situ stones below.
So the church is in that half. We have the cloister here, and those are contemporary buildings, we think, at the moment?
Yes, I mean, they would have been up and standing at the same time, but of course, you know, all these buildings would have been repaired, extended, you know, refurbished, so we'll probably get evidence for multiple phases of building and architecture here, so it'll be quite a complex picture to pull apart.
And the beauty of excavating an already destroyed church is that you get the opportunity to peer at what's underneath it.
One thing we'd really like to find is some evidence of the pre-Norman conquest church, which we have a strong suspicion that it's underneath the later one.
Right, so that's an area to watch then.
Oh, it certainly is.
The finds are starting to come through, one or two, and a tile we found was beautiful, yes.
I found it. Just making sure everyone knows. I'm really proud of it. So they say that might be a bird picture. We don't know. We don't know where it's coming from, but it's nice. There you go.
We're inside the church here, so we think a lot of decorated floor tiles.
Oh wow,
that
nice.
have been coming out, lots of different patterns.
Yeah.
I think I'm up to 6 different designs.
With Trench 1 starting to get a positive idea on the medieval church, Trench 2 is revealing a very different story. A mixed array of features has already given it a nickname, the Mystery Trench.
This is incredible, a real feast for the eyes here, Hugh.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's lots of things going on. We're not quite certain what all of them are yet, but this trench is here because of the new geophysics we did, which showed there's a sort of range of buildings running up here that aren't part of the cloister complex, possibly the infirmary, maybe some other important building in the complex. And the other is to see, do we have any evidence of earlier activity? All we've done so far is take off the loose rubble. So all these differences in levels, they represent actual surfaces and floors. So you can almost see the outline of a room there. We're stood on this packed flint rubble, which seems to be part of a demolished wall that runs around. So we've clearly got a building going off in this direction. So this is very much the late medieval monastery up here.
So this is a bit of window lead. You'll find lots of window lead because this all would have been glazed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So it would have been like this in a window, and there would have been a pane of glass here, a pane of glass here. Oh, is that a bit of tile?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's only a little bit, but you'll be able to see as you start to kind of put them together, you'll be able to see the patterns coming out. So we've got lots of that, and there's all different patterns and everything. So we had lions, and there's a fleur-de-lis on that one there.
With medieval finds filling up the trays, eyes are also peeled for anything earlier. And in the lower part of the Mystery Trench, something promising is starting to emerge.
So straight away, the eye is drawn to that black feature there. What do you think that is?
Well, yeah, it's very distinctive, isn't it? I mean, the black's caused because there's lots of charcoal and burnt material, there's animal bone, there's even bits of pus in it. And that looks like quite a large cut feature going into the ground.
Like a rubbish pit, maybe?
Maybe a rubbish pit, yeah. It kind of also looks a bit familiar. Because last year, when we were digging a bit further over in that direction, we found 3 pits very similar to that, and they were underneath the later medieval building. So when we excavated, we actually found they were Anglo-Saxon in date, sort of 663 to 775 AD. So there's a possibility we might have something interesting here.
Last year's discoveries were the first indication that the team could find earlier structures on the site. And getting any Anglo-Saxon evidence within these archaeological layers is crucial when considering the Abbey's next-door neighbour. It's something that's lured back Time Team's Lawrence Shaw.
It's great to be back here at Cerne Abbas and join the team on their second season of excavations at this incredible abbey. And I'm also really looking forward to exploring the larger landscape.
Lawrence is keen to understand the relationship between the Abbey and the Giant. And he's meeting Martin Papworth, who in 2020 fronted a team of archaeologists in an attempt to pinpoint a much debated date for the creation of the Giant. The results of their work were both surprising and exciting.
It's been something that's a big mystery. Over a long period of time, he's extraordinary, he's internationally famous. But who created him, and why, and when?
How old have you thought this site is?
Well, I was working with a guy called Mike Allen, who's an environmental archaeologist. He believed it was prehistoric. He thought there might be to find that. I, being more historical archaeologist, looked at the records and said, well, it can't be earlier than 17th century because we've got no real records earlier than the 17th century. And so it's like there's all the history surrounding the abbey. You know, why don't they mention this chalk figure on the hillside? 2020 was a big year because it's the centenary of the bequest of the Giant to us by the Pitt Rivers family. So money was found to obtain samples to give a date to it. And we were allowed to dig 4 trenches.
The team collected micromolluscs or snails in the soil, which told them about the landscape at the time of the giant's construction, and dated samples using a technique known as optically stimulated luminescence, or OSL, which measures the last time light ignited quartzite in the soil.
The dates were really unexpected. They all came out in medieval, so not 17th century, definitely not prehistoric.
Have those dates made you think differently about the giant, its relationship to the abbey and this landscape as a whole?
Well, they are contemporary, according to the dates, so therefore, would one ignore the other? You can't really escape it, can you? If your mid-range between 700 and 1100 is 900, and that's when they founded the abbey, then yes, one would wonder whether it was actually a thing commissioned by the abbot. And if so, why on earth would that be? That's the fascinating thing about the mystery of the giant. We may have got a date, but we still don't know why. It's all down to the excavation now, just to sort of make that link.
And for Hugh and the team, an Anglo-Saxon date for the giant has certainly brought these two sites much closer together.
Could there be a link between the early monastery and the giant? What do you think of that?
I think so. I mean, if the giant is what the dates suggest, then there has to be a link, because the giant would be very visible from this very position. You'd see his outstretched arm almost waving at you. So there's no way that the two can't be interrelated in some way, whether that's the early monks created the giant or they put their monastery near the giant as he was already there. One can't say at this stage.
So I'm hoping that pit could provide more solid Anglo-Saxon evidence and bring these two sites even closer together.
So we have a nice group of oyster shells here.
Yeah. I see, there's a shell coming out there. Yeah.
And then we're also collecting all the animal bone from here.
You've got loads of animal bone there, haven't you? Is that from rubbish, do you think, then? Something like that?
Possibly, but we kind of need to work out what's going on over here to work out what that means.
You mean the black splodge, don't you? Yeah. Well, what do you think it is?
We'll have to find out.
Hopefully a pit, but we'll find out.
Okay, Mom, the next one's 109, is that right?
Okay, 109 with George.
The Cerne Abbey Research Project is run as a training dig.
So the first thing you want to do is measure from the string down to the top of the ground, so to this.
Yeah.
Over the next 4 weeks, the site will become home to many student archaeologists who want to develop their skills or simply have a go.
I'm closer to a hole tile.
Yeah.
But yeah, they go together because all the things match. We all had a bit of a minor pub crawl last night. It's very, very social, so we all sort of had breakfast, dinner together. So this is my last day, back to real work.
What is your real work?
So I work as a paramedic.
Oh, wow.
So this is sort of a hobby, passion.
Yeah, because there's a real mix of people here, isn't there?
Yeah, from all over the world as well.
I'm an archaeology student from California, and I came here last year for the first dig, and I'm here again because I just love it here so much. Everything you find is so old. To us, the 1800s is old, but here it's a completely different level.
I didn't know what to expect. I hoped that it's gonna be as fascinating as I imagined, from movies and stuff. But it's way better.
This year, there are also a number of Time Team supporters who've joined the team.
So, Chris, and it turns out that you are already a kind of part of the Time Team family, aren't you?
Well, that's right. Yeah, I've always had an interest in archaeology. I became a patron, and so time to put a little bit back into the dig.
So, are you camping down on the field then, Chris, with everyone else?
We're all together. It's a good mix. We're bonding well.
Many of the Cerne Abbas villagers have been volunteering their time as pot washers.
It's lovely to be part of it and to see it happening within the village, you know. I mean, everyone in the village is involved. They're either cooking cakes for people, or digging, or washing finds, or stewarding. I mean, it's a real whole village thing, isn't it?
And the dig has attracted people from all walks of life, including local resident and renowned BBC correspondent Kate Adie.
So, Kate, you're a member of the local historical society and you're now involved in the dig.
We knew that the abbey was somewhere. It's in the name, Cerne Abbas. Of course, there's two bits of it over there, but that was it. Certain people in the village who'd got some experience also got the chance to join the professionals. It's been fantastic. And it's lovely to be able to expand the story. You know, we can now say, here it is, and here's bits of it.
And what dig isn't complete without a dig cat?
We've got the dig mascot.
Meet Walter. And possibly one of Walter's ancestors isn't too far away either.
This is the skull of a cat.
I'm very carefully excavating it because the skull is usually the most fragile.
It was kind of spooky. As soon as I uncovered it, then that actual cat turned up to look at it. So it's probably not medieval, but it's still exciting in my opinion.
Also working on site is project partner and medieval historian Dr Helen Gittos from the University of Oxford. As a local to the area, she's familiar with the image of the giant. But the revised dating means that for the first time she's been able to place him in a cultural context.
The giant is why we're here, isn't it? I mean, what an extraordinary figure that is. And when I first heard this news that, wow, the giant is actually Anglo-Saxon, I began to realise that it fits quite well.
Right.
The date is not precise, but it centres on the Anglo-Saxon period, somewhere between 700 and 1100.
Right. And what role was it playing in the Anglo-Saxon period?
We know that the giant is a depiction of Hercules, and the clue is his club. It's a bit like the keys of St. Peter tell you that that saint is St. Peter. The club acts as the clue that this is Hercules. Even his ribs are very, very distinctive and characteristic of how Hercules was being depicted. And with his left arm out, it's very, very likely that there would have been a lion skin hanging from it, because there are countless images of Hercules in that pose. So when he's made, he's Hercules.
So is this the Anglo-Saxons bringing their knowledge of Hercules?
Well, why would you depict Hercules in the Anglo-Saxon periods? That is such a puzzle. But it's quite clear that in the 9th century in particular, so this is sort of Vikings in Western Europe, that kind of time, there was a real interest in Hercules. So once I'd realised that it was Hercules, once I'd realised that it fits within an Anglo-Saxon context, that people were interested in Hercules, you know, the next question is, why Cerne? I discovered that it fits with a special kind of assembly site to gather people from a wide area to muster an army.
Helen believes that during the Anglo-Saxon period, this Herculean symbol would have been a visible landmark, possibly used as a rallying point for the West Saxon armies mustering against Viking attacks. But as the monks arrived and the abbey established at his feet, it seems that the figure of Hercules may not have appealed to everyone.
Some people thought Hercules was a model of manly might.
Right.
Bold and brave and courageous. Some people thought that he was a terrible role model. And indeed, there's a monk who was writing at Cerne who described him as, you know, that terrible, terrible giant. And it seems that the monks here decided that they couldn't just grass him over. They reimagined him as being an image of their local saint, St. Eadwald.
St. Eadwald was born a prince in 835 AD and was brother to St. Edmund, the king of East Anglia. According to 11th century writers, Eadwald became a hermit, and after his death, he was interred at Cerne Abbey, becoming a lucrative draw for the monastery.
When we think about monks and abbeys, we think about people being very proper and perhaps shrewd and prude, but on the side of the hill we've got a big naked man, and how does that work? How do we explain that?
They thought at the time that hermits were associated with nakedness. So an image of a wholly naked man was completely plausible at that time.
And Helen has another good reason to link St. Eadwald with the giant.
I discovered a text that was written for Cerne, for the monks of Cerne to sing about their local saint. and it tells the story of Eadwald's life. And what's completely astonishing about it, and the bit that got my heart beating faster, is it describes Eadwald as a hermit wandering around the countryside, looking for somewhere special to found a monastery. And he comes to the top of a hill, a sharp cliff, and he plants his staff in the ground, and a tree flowers, and that's the sign, the clue. And then he runs down this steep cliff.
Right.
And at the bottom of the cliff is a holy well of water, and that's where he founds his hermitage.
And it seems that St Augustine's well, situated only a stone's throw away from the abbey, is the very water source mentioned in the text.
And it describes so precisely this landscape, with the giant on the hill and the monastery at its feet and the holy well. And to have it all together is just amazing.
Back on site, there's excitement in the mystery trench.
It's like packed with.
It's herringbone, isn't it? See?
Sorry? Herringbone pattern, you mean? Totally. They've used ceramic building material. Yeah.
Oh, that's not a floor.
Oh, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I saw a right angle and I thought, what's going on there?
Hugh, and there's loads of people suddenly, so what's going on?
There's no secrets on this site. It's a hearth. It's been formed by stones being set on their edges. We've been seeing some burning here, for a while.
We do see some ash and charcoal in front of it as well, and we've had quite a bit of window glass and lead came from this area.
The discovery of the hearth and other small finds,
a piece of very nice window glass there,
as well as fragments of 16th century pottery, are suggesting a post-dissolution structure.
It's kind of looking more industrially utilitarian-y, workshop-y to me.
Mm-hmm. That's archaeology for you. The more you do, the more you know.
The indications shown in the geophysics are now starting to show up in the archaeology.
What's so nice about this, as always, is to see a trench go in on top of the geophysics and get the ground truthing. So, in the absence of a limousine, they've told me I've got to walk to the top.
John's heading up the hill to do geophysics on another feature, which Hugh believes could have close links to the abbey.
We're not just interested in the central part of the monastery, we're interested in the whole landscape around us because, all these features are interconnected. And there's one in particular at the head of the Giant that's been rather overlooked by most archaeologists. We've got a sort of square enclosure up there that may be prehistoric in date, but in the middle of it and on a slightly different alignment is an east-west running building platform. And that could well be the location of a late medieval chapel, which is not uncommon that they have little subsidiary chapels around the landscape used by the monks when they're here.
Known locally as the frying pan, but more commonly the Trendle, this earthwork is also a well-documented feature of the Cerne Abbas landscape. Like the Giant, its date has been heavily debated, but never fully explored.
The Trendle's always been thought of in terms of the prehistoric, or perhaps the site of a Romano-Celtic temple. Well, it doesn't look like that as an earthwork. It's a weird sort of earthwork. But actually, I think you look at other hill sites associated with abbeys, that could be a chapel up there. Hilltops occupied by a chapel closer to God. It becomes a bit of a theme. You've got an east-west structure with the pointing giant towards the abbey.
Well, that's nice, isn't it?
And some people have even suggested it could be linked to St Eadwald.
So we've got a nice flat survey area for you. That's what they said. They didn't tell me it's at the top of a flipping mountain.
That is perfect. That is just what we need.
The Trendle is home to a herd of sheep who are supposed to keep the grass down. So if we're going to do some geophysics, it's time to get mowing.
If I knew there was a pub at the end, I might be going a bit faster.
Like the Giant and the monastery below, the Trendle is a protected monument. And this is the first time permission has ever been granted to do geophysics in this area. Hugh thinks the east-west alignment is already strong evidence for a chapel within the earthworks.
Medieval churches aren't always nicely aligned.
But it is a perfect alignment. I dropped it into GIS. I was like, oh my God, that's just bang on, isn't it? Yeah, that's the really interesting
I know,
thing,
that's what leapt out at me.
Yeah.
And I thought, So you can actually see the walls of the chapel.
Right.
So you don't need us.
No,
we do. We do. Well, you needed the exercise
John
to get
just
up
walked
here.
all out the hill as well.
The team hope the survey can help solve the mystery of what might be up here and perhaps provide some clues as to when it might have been built.
Got the Giant just behind you, and so this area here, the Trendle, has just been completely overlooked. So it could be prehistoric, it could be Roman, it could be Saxon, oh, it could be medieval. You know, and that's about it. That's the sum of our knowledge.
But Harry hopes to answer these questions by finding out what's hidden just below the surface.
Multispectral drones capture invisible light, and that's really useful for detecting things which we can't really see on the surface, but we can look at vegetation stress.
So you'll be able to map stone walls and other things that are causing stress to the grass.
Exactly, it's how the buried archaeology is affecting the vegetation on the ground surface effectively.
And between John's geophysics and your earthwork survey, this could be the closest thing we can do to putting a trowel in the ground and actually trying to improve that narrative.
Absolutely, so we can get a really detailed 3D model.
And Hugh can't wait to investigate.
Now you've cut the grass, what have we got here?
That's the big question. We've got a roughly rectangular enclosure going around. Slap bang in the middle is this platform. It's the perfect size for a little chapel. If we've got a little stone chapel here, it's almost certainly going to be post-Norman conquest. But there's every chance, knowing that we've got a monastery down there, we've got the tradition of St Edward coming and founding a hermitage somewhere around here before that, there could be underneath something earlier.
And with so much scope, John has got a plan for the geophys.
We're going to get the magnetics in first, and then we'll bring in the radar to go inside the earthworks and see if we've got an actual structure there.
And maybe even discover links to the hermit, St Eadwald.
And a nice empty stone grave, please.
And so John, Harry and the geophys team get to work above the Giant. This really is a golden opportunity to investigate these hilltop earthworks and find out what lies inside.
If you'd like to see more episodes like this, you can make it happen.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world. Enjoy front row seats for the greatest show on Earth and under it.
Back down at the bottom of the hill, work has been progressing. In Trench 1, they've located the first interior feature within the church.
It's almost as if there was a door here once.
Even if it has been heavily robbed out.
Hugh, what tells you it's a doorway?
We know the line of the church wall comes through here and the cloister's at a higher level. So if you're going to access the church from the cloister, you're going to be stepping down into the church. I also know you normally would expect to find a doorway coming from the cloister into the church somewhere in this area. Now Fred, just today, has found a rectangular cut into the chalk, which is exactly squared and definitely held a very large, substantial, upright piece of stone. And it looks like it's one side of a door lintel, and the other one will be where we've taken less material off over there, and it provides a nice width for a door. There's also some slight stepping in the chalk, so we'll probably get some very rough, raggedy steps coming up here, cut into the chalk, until you get to the level of the cloister behind.
So while Hugh's happy with the outcome of Fred's doorway, over on the other side of the trench, archaeological supervisor Erin is puzzling over another feature.
What do we think this is?
It could be the base of a pillar, but we're not too sure at the moment. It's all a bit strange. There was a matching one in the far corner, but as we've cleaned back, it's kind of disappeared.
The excavations have concluded a high percentage of the larger stones and architectural fragments have been quarried out in antiquity. But deep in the church trench, it seems one finely carved stone has eluded the stone robbers.
Hugh, this is a lovely grave slab. Presumably Purbeck marble?
It is. It's been robbed out of the church, but then probably snapped at that point. So we're missing the sort of top half of it. But there's quite a lot of decoration still left on it.
What have we got?
Well, you can see a little stepped pattern here that would have run down here. That's the step base. Then there's the remains of a shaft running up here, which then goes behind this elongated shield.
So the shaft would have been heading up to a larger cross at the top?
Yes, to a sort of very decorative crosshead, which would have been above the top of the shield.
What does that tell us about the age and significance?
Well, I mean, the fact that the shield is on here, that's quite unusual. And it seems to be quite an early example from the 13th century. It's a very pointy shield. But of course, everything's been robbed out. And stones like this, you know, very useful. You could turn it upside down and make it a table in a scullery or a door lintel or whatever else. So probably other fragments of stone like this are all through the village and have just been reused. So we're lucky to get this as a survival.
Lawrence has headed to meet a local expert who's been mapping fragments of the abbey discovered in houses and gardens across the village.
Did you know this street is called Blood and Guts Lane?
No, I didn't.
Robin Mills is part of the Cerne Historical Society and knows a few star finds in some hidden locations.
I think it's been common knowledge that site was treated a bit like a stone quarry. If you needed a bit of stone to build a wall or something in their garden, it could be found up there. It's absolutely everywhere.
Oh, so what have we got here?
Well, I mean, it's an old flint wall. It's evidently put there purely for decoration. It also reminds people of the presence of the abbey.
It looks like it might be the top of a little windowette or something like that.
But it's a classical, that trifoliate design, isn't it?
Absolutely. What else have you got to show me?
Through here,
Blimey.
Lawrence, yeah.
This is...
It's a tight squeeze.
Feels well hidden, this bit.
It is well hidden.
Ah, there we go.
Yes.
Look at that. Absolutely beautiful. It's got a crown on it.
It's an amazingly finely carved crown. It's got this fleur-de-lis design all around the edge there, but surely to goodness that comes from the abbey. I personally think it might have been a keystone of an arch, you know. I would say quite a high status object.
So after getting his eye in with Robin, Lawrence heads off around the village to see what else he can discover.
Here we go.
And the vicarage garden proves a particularly good spot.
This is the base of a colonnade, and we're finding these Purbeck marble shafts on the dig site at the moment. These beautiful, elaborate, beveled bases that would have held these very chunky colonnades. But there are also other bits and bobs. We've got this one. Oh, blimey, that's heavy. Which is hamstone. You can see it's a carved relief. We can make out the individual features. It's been very well weathered. But we also have this incredible, elaborate sort of rosette style ceiling boss that would have been spectacular to behold and would have been integral to the structure of these buildings as well. All just hidden away in this rockery. You would never have known they were there if you didn't go looking for them.
And a return to St Augustine's Well, next to the dig site, proves even more fruitful.
St Augustine's Well is a really important part of that bigger landscape narrative that we're pulling together here at Cerne Abbas. But what I love most about it is that today it's absolutely littered in stonework and masonry that would have come from the abbey itself. So along this front edge in front of me here, are remains of window frames and door frames that have been taken from our site and used just to provide a trim and edge to the modern day rendition of the well. But also got these plinths just either side of me that are beautiful, they're grand, but hidden just behind the grass here, you've got the most beautiful Catherine wheel that's been carved as a decoration into this. And along with all the other bits that we've been finding in the other back gardens and throughout the village, is really helping to bring to life this lost abbey.
At the start of week 2, a decision was made to extend the mystery trench and uncover what looks to be part of an intact wall.
So now I can move into this corner and chase the wall. So you can see stones poking out from here. It's covered with a layer of plaster, and we've found some bits of painted plaster here as well. So the wall must have been partially painted.
The extension has given Hugh a better understanding of what he's got in the trench. And it appears the workshop discovered in week 1 is actually housed within a much larger building.
We're getting a sort of clearer idea of what's happened in this building in various periods, and we're now getting on just on top of the medieval layers below. And we found the edge or the face of a wall here. And it's one wall for this room. This building had 3 rooms. One room goes beyond the section there. And this is the dividing wall between the 2 rooms. Also in the top, you can just see the beginnings of a fireplace emerging in this wall, and that would have serviced the room beyond. What's really nice is that just excavating on the other side of the room, we're getting the very top course of its corresponding wall. So we're getting the sort of full dimensions of the room appearing.
Is it small?
And in the spoil near the fireplace, a possible monastic artefact has been discovered.
I think it might be a stylus, a little bit bent in half, but it's got a very sharp end this end and a very flat end that end. So it's possibly been used for scraping into wax tablets, and the flat end would be used for wiping out if you made a mistake. It's made of lead. In there.
As digging progresses in the extension, Hugh puzzles over an emerging feature.
There is, for the length of the leaf trail, is soft sand. It does seem like a sandy patch. That is kind of intriguing.
And all the lead from here.
And we're getting a concentration of little lead drops. But interestingly, all these, they're trimmings. These are lead trimmings. It looks like they're cutting lead. So what are they doing?
The post hole over there that Oliver is digging, we're getting lots of melted lead.
So it looks like they're melting lead down.
Yes. Yeah.
Working out what they were melting lead down for could be key. And as word spreads about the dig, something rather exciting from the village has made its way to the finds shed.
What have we got? Well, it's obviously a large lump of stone, but as you can see, it's been very carefully shaped, and it actually sits that way up.
Okay, so like that or another?
Another 90
Okay,
degrees, so
okay.
it's staring down at you from the top of the building. And it's at that point of the wall, just where the roof joins. And you would have had a series of these interspersed along the length of the wall. And it's got a rather cute carving on it.
It's got a lovely carving. So we've got 2 ears, a nice round face, and some possible nostrils here. What is it? It looks like a cat.
No, well, no, because originally you can just see the little scar here. It would have had a beak, and it's a sort of beaked beast of some kind.
I see. So this rougher triangle coming down there was once part of the actual thing itself.
And what's really interesting about this is that this piece of stonework is Romanesque, and it's earlier than almost all the other stonework we've had in our excavations so far. And it's, you know, it's kind of some of our best evidence so far of an earlier church on the site here.
Fantastic.
And hopefully there's more out there.
Although the corbel wasn't directly from the trenches, it's likely it came from a part of the abbey buildings. Its Romanesque style is a valuable clue as to how the early church may have looked. But it also takes the team just within the date range of the giant. Having also discovered intact walls in the church trench, the team have decided to extend out and pick apart some of the emerging features at the western end.
It's beginning to get a little bit clearer now, and we're beginning to start to see phasing in the structure.
Excellent.
So it's clearly not all one phase. We can see part of the cloister there, and we now know we've got two phases of cloister. I don't know the dates of them, but they're late medieval.
By two phases, you mean there are two different cloisters, or just there's a
There's a rebuilding.
Okay, right.
They seem to, there's a sort of first phase there, and then they rebuild probably the west range and make the cloister a little bit bigger in that westerly direction.
And at the bottom of the trench, there's been an intriguing discovery.
We're just getting a little bit of walling that looks rather different.
That does look very different.
These are sort of very crudely sort of shaped chalk blocks. They're kind of just sat on top of each other. They don't seem to be mortared, or if they were mortared, the mortar's all eroded away. But interestingly, the late medieval church wall goes over the top of it.
So this is an earlier structure?
Yes.
More crudely built?
More crudely built. It kind of hints at something that predates the big church here. Now, they could be Romanesque, so it could be from the late 11th century.
Right.
Or they could be earlier than that. We just don't know.
So the team have finally found what could be part of the early medieval monastery that predates the more ornate 13th century church. And it may also have links to the earliest history at Cerne.
What's interesting is it may tie in with an antiquarian account from the middle of the 19th century.
Okay.
The workmen here were extracting stone, and they found what they described as either a chapel or a shrine at the west end of the church.
Which is where we are.
Next to the hedge. Now, there isn't a hedge here now, but we know where that wall is there. There used to be a hedge. So it's kind of in this area.
And if this was a shrine, could it be to Saint Eadwald?
So he will have had a shrine, and that will have been one of the centerpieces of the whole building, and it will probably have been encrusted with jewels, and people will have given gifts to it. We know so little about this building that we don't know where in the building it would have been. It might have been in a crypt, and so far as I'm aware, nothing of it survives. And so trying to work out what was here before is really, really interesting. That's where I hope we'll get some real answers.
As the phasing of the structures in the church trench becomes a little clearer, so too does the mystery monument on top of the Trendle. Harry and John have been processing their data and have got some results.
Right, John, Harry, it's that time. I'd like to see the results of your surveys, please. How are they looking?
Well, the main thing that's coming out of the data set to me is a lack of magnetic activity. So I can say automatically, you're not looking at a settlement site up there. There's no extensive burning, there's no large rubbish pits.
So the fact that it's quiet actually is quite interesting, quite revealing.
I mean, if there's potentially something ecclesiastical up there, people are only visiting it on a sort of temporary, occasional basis, just to pray or do other sort of types of activities. Makes sense it's quiet.
So it's helping to start give us an idea of what's going on there. What about your results, Harry?
We have results. We just see on the north side here, we can see perhaps some evidence of some structure there, okay, maybe some walls. Where we're getting less vegetation growth, that we're seeing two very parallel lines, and I think that may hint at some form of stone structure going on there.
Well, I would say that fits really well, because that looks to me like a medieval wall.
But where's the entrance into the enclosure?
Well, let's look at the microtopography. What do you make of this, Hugh? This area here.
Well, I mean, it makes it much clearer than it is on the ground, because on the ground you couldn't really get a sense of what's going on, but now it looks like we've got a building with two cells or two elements to it. It looks like you've got a little southern entrance there into a sort of chapel type structure.
Yeah. And we've still got some more data coming, John?
We've still got the radar.
When are we expecting that?
Just hold fire. Quality's worth waiting for.
It's the middle of week 2, and the weather's changed from glorious summer sun to miserable and wet. Both trenches have already uncovered a host of small finds, architectural fragments and building materials.
Hugh, the weather's closed in, but it's a nice opportunity to think about what this site would have looked like.
Oh, absolutely. We've got a few fragments that weren't robbed away, but we can still tell a lot about the buildings that were there, and they give us an idea of the sort of the decoration. There's all little things on the stone that tell you about how the building's been constructed, things you'd never normally see when the building is up and complete. So on this window mullion, you've got these two little notches.
Yeah.
And they would have held little iron clamps, you know, secured with lead, which held the sort of pieces of stone together. If I turn it over, you can see this little cross mark. This is a little mark that the masons have put on here, and it's so they know which piece is meant to go with which and how it's to fit together.
So it's a bit like when you get your flat pack furniture and you have your manual and it says put your 1A with your 2B or whatever it might be.
Absolutely, but actually they normally fit together better.
Fair enough. I can see this lovely hole in the top of this. It's got a nice bow to it. Is that an arch of some
Yeah,
kind?
this is some kind of arching. So again, you've got just a hole that's been drilled just to take a little, probably an iron peg. And that's not really to hold the weight of it, it's just to enable the masons to construct it and put it together. And then once the arch is complete, obviously the weight holds itself. And we've got fragments of moulding from the arcading. And what's really nice about these is some of these preserve in the cracks some of the original paintwork.
I mean, that's so vibrant, isn't it? And some people might say garish, but it would have been striking to see that when it was fully painted.
No, absolutely. And we've also got sort of other special types of stone that have been brought in. So we've got Purbeck marble, and this is just a decorative column that would have been sort of part of an arch or doorway. And again, when it was brand new and polished, it would have been, you know, very nice dark greeny blue colour. So, and also it's got lots of little shells in it, so it would have been not just a sort of plain colour, but it would have a really nice texture to it.
Right.
Most of this stonework is 13th, early 14th century, where there seems to have been quite a big rebuilding of the church where this came from. But there is one piece that is rather different. You can tell from the weathering this has been in a really exposed location.
Right.
And that gives us a hint to its function. I don't know if you can guess what it is.
It looks like, it looks quite a posh toilet seat, to be honest.
I think it'd be a bit rough for that, but it's actually the crenellated top to a chimney.
Oh, okay, of course, that makes sense.
So, you know, you can imagine that as a fancy tall chimney. That's the very top bit. So it's been really up high, exposed to the elements, and probably also the soot and everything, you know, the fumes coming out helps erode the stone.
And what's really exciting about this discovery is that it was found in the workshop section of the Mystery Trench, near to where the fireplace was uncovered.
The workshop, which is Dissolution in period, so 16th century, it's set in the footprint of a medieval building that was probably partially demolished already.
Right.
And it's giving us a little hint what that building might be.
Okay, so what hint is that?
Well, it's in a sort of an interesting location on the edge of the sort of the main precinct. It looks like it's divided into three parts. It looks a bit like a hall, a domestic building. Mm-hmm. And with a chimney like that, one candidate it could be is actually the Abbot's Lodge.
Okay, but there is an Abbot Lodge on site at the moment, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, but the one that was built in the early 16th century, so really only a few decades before the Abbey was closed down. So for several hundred years, the Abbots must have lived somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Once we get through that workshop layer, we know there's more medieval stuff underneath, and we'll go and see if there's evidence for a sort of high status domestic residence.
So the archaeology in the Mystery Trench is pointing the team in the direction of a medieval hall or earlier Abbot's Lodge. The fireplace and chimney are giving an idea of its status, how it was used, and what it might have looked like. Lawrence is heading 10 miles north to the Benedictine Abbey Church of Sherborne, which was a contemporary of Cerne Abbey. He wants to see how the finds from the trenches and around the village may have looked, especially as the team now believe the two abbeys were laid out in a similar way.
As incredible as the artefacts are that we're finding at Cerne Abbey, it's really hard to understand what they would have looked like in their prime. So I've come here to Sherborne Abbey to try and find a few hints of how it would have been. And I'm already starting to see a few things that look familiar. This is exactly the sort of thing I was hoping to find. We've got these beautiful Purbeck marble colonnades with a shine, lustre finish to it. Very, very different to the 500-year-old buried colonnade that we've got from our sites, but it really gives you an idea of how this would have once looked. So you can imagine this little piece once would have held up this beautiful arch at Cerne Abbey.
And at the bottom of a secret stairwell, Lawrence has discovered a trapdoor that houses something else familiar.
Well, would you have a look at that? A beautiful medieval floor, and if you look at this tile that's come from our site, they're identical to that which are here at Sherborne. Just beautiful.
Work has been progressing in the mystery trench. The team now believe they've discovered what was going on in the workshop within the old Abbot's Lodge.
Well, we fully excavated the half, and you can see it's really burnt. There's obviously been heavy use of it, and we're getting lots and lots of little bits of lead. There's a small sample of the kinds of things that have been coming out of this sort of surface here.
Related to anything in particular?
Well, it's basically they seem to be stripping off lead from around the monastery, bringing it here, melting it on this hearth, and then the final feature we've got shows what they're doing with it. We've just revealed in the last, few hours, this orange sand feature.
Right.
And what it is, it's a pit that's been filled with a really fine sand, and it's for casting. They're melting the lead and casting it into ingots. It's basically the people, shortly after the abbey's been closed, they're coming here, they're stripping the abbey of its lead and then casting it into ingots and taking it away. We know from other sites which have better records that it could be hundreds of tons.
Hundreds of
tons of lead from a large church and from the cloister.
Blimey.
So the team are uncovering what appears to be the end of the abbey's story. Not only was the stone pillaged, but so was the lead. And as the week progresses, more and more remnants are found across the site.
There's so many bits of lead lying about everywhere that have been recovered. So obviously some sort of recycling was happening here.
What about
it? That is not lead. You would not be able to carry it.
It is. That's huge.
That is huge. I've never seen such a large piece of roof lead, but wow.
And lead isn't the only part of the roof found in the spoil heap.
Oh, those are good old medieval nails there, Dom. Utterly impossible to date.
Yes.
Because they could be anything from Iron Age to 19th century, but we know that they're medieval and they're probably connected to all sorts of joinery in the roof and elsewhere.
In a corner of the extended church trench, part of a surface of the West Range has been uncovered. It takes the team back to the abbey before the onslaught of the Dissolution.
Have you seen the floor? It's like a mortar floor inside the West Range.
Okay.
This is the floor that the monks would have walked on just before they handed over the keys of the abbey to Henry VIII. We know the names of the men who walked on that floor.
How wonderful.
I always found that fascinating. We know the pensions they got.
Gosh.
We also know some of the scandal.
Yes, indeed.
The last abbot was pretty notorious. I think one of the accusations against him is that his wife, and children were kind of running around the precinct.
Okay.
So
wonderful, yeah.
I think that's very special.
And there's one more glorious discovery to end the week.
We're in the west end of the church. It's not unreasonable to expect we might have burials here. We have found a rather intriguing find, and it's a little bronze or copper alloy letter, and it's actually an M. And this would have been set as one of a series of letters, making up a Latin or French, Norman French inscription around a grave slab. And that's been found just here in the interior of the church.
It's the start of a sunny week 3. Everyone's heading off to site after a hearty breakfast. it's all starting to come together in the mystery trench. So for Bree and the team, maybe it's not looking quite so much of a mystery anymore.
So we've discovered our hearth has expanded somewhat. We thought it was limited to this herringbone structure at this end. But as we've cleaned it back, we found that it's actually cut into this post-medieval surface. And you can see that it's bounded by some stones, such as this chalk. And we've also discovered that there's a post pad just to this side, and that would have held a structure, possibly to help them hold a vessel for melting the lead or moving the lead once it's melted.
So lovely to have a chance to do some digging. Here in the centre of this room we've got this hearth, and then right next to the hearth we've got this pit. And we think that this pit is for casting the lead ingots. And within the pit, to the very bottom of it, you've got this sort of bluey grey clay. And then round the edges here, you've got this really hard surface, which we think is probably hardened by the heat from melting of the lead. Almost none of these have been dug in modern times. So it's really exciting to have this sort of, you know, the actual process of dismantling a great big monastery like this. So here we have, you know, the archaeology of the dissolution of the monasteries right in front of our eyes.
The discovery of the casting pit is a rare find, and although simple in its construction, would have been central to the dismantling of the abbey and the recycling of its assets. This success helps balance out what's happening on the other side of the trench. The promising pit of oyster shells is not the Anglo-Saxon discovery the team thought it was.
We were hoping that this dark area was the top of a pit filled with lots of dark burnt material. Kind of looks a bit Saxon, and it's turned out it isn't. It's just a sort of dump of burnt material, only a few centimetres thick. However, it's still interesting because it contains all sorts of artefacts and finds, as well as charcoal and probably environmental evidence. And it's really looking like it's come from a clearing out of a hearth, a domestic area, so we've got lots of bits of animal bone, which kind of suggests that it's being butchered and cut up. We've got bits of pottery as well, it's late medieval pottery. It's not a Saxon pit, unfortunately, but what we do have is evidence for activities that may have been taking place in the building behind me.
Although it's a bit of a disappointment, the new dating of the pit means that it's now tying in nicely with what's turning up inside the building.
So the main reason we extended this trench was to see the extent of this fireplace over here and to figure out what this side of the building was used for. And you can see Emily here taking some samples, because we did discover quite a lot of food waste, including fish bone, animal bone, even eggshells. So perhaps this indicates this was used as a kitchen.
While the archaeology in the mystery trench has been dominated by lead and the workshop, the kitchen finds are giving a picture of daily life pre-dissolution.
It's obviously an iron object. You can see at the end, there's almost like 3 prongs coming off that are curving like that. Mm-hmm. But it looks a little bit like something called a flesh hook. Okay. Which essentially, if you're sort of boiling or stewing large hunks of meat, you'd have an iron tool which you can hoik out the meat out of the pot and pot it onto the platter.
That would work quite nicely because it's got other little things that hint to food processing. So possible blade there, do you think?
Yeah, we've got a blade here. I mean, you can see that on the top is flat, but then it tapers to an edge there.
But the favourite thing they've pulled out, which I identified this, so I hope you're proud of me. This is from a thornback ray. So they've got evidence of processing of fish and other meats and materials that are coming out of this site.
Buoyed up by his fishy discovery, Lawrence has met with Assistant Site Director Ches, who's been building a picture of life in the Abbot's Lodge.
So we've got some beautiful things that you've picked out here. Talk me through what we're looking at.
This here is found from our mystery trench. Mm-hmm. It's like a mortar and pestle.
Ah, fantastic.
So this would have been used in the kitchen, which fits really well with the fireplace that we found. So they're using it for grinding spices, herbs, flowers, things like that. We've also got this, which is the handle from a dish, almost like a paella dish.
And it's got a lovely green glaze on it. What sort of time period would that date to?
So that's roughly 13th to 15th century.
So right bang on the
Bang on what we're looking for.
And with all the window lead in the mystery trench, it seems appropriate the team have something special to go with it.
And is this a bit of glass down here?
It is a bit of glass. This is from our church trench, and this is gorgeous. This is one of the nicest pieces of glass we've had. But it's beautiful painted window glass.
It is beautiful, as you say. You've got the border along the bottom there and the top there, and this maybe ivy leaves, do you think? Sort of swirling pattern around the middle.
This is our nicest piece.
Is that a star find?
Yeah, that's a star find.
The mystery trench has really earned its nickname over the course of the last 3 weeks, keeping the archaeologists puzzling over the contents. It's certainly been a jump from the richness of finds from the Abbot's Lodge to the grubbiness of a lead-melting workshop. And even with this understanding, at the start of the final week, Hugh has a new theory on the lead working.
This is what you do when you're digging. You kind of refine your opinion given the evidence that starts coming up. So it was definitely still a workshop for melting lead, but actually when we started looking at the material culture a bit more carefully, we realised that we were getting bits of casting waste from making window leads, window canes.
Okay.
And also we got little offcuts of glass. So we are looking at a sort of glazing project that's taken place. The narrative shifted a little bit, but it's not been turned on its head.
It's nearing the end of the excavation, and the team have dug deep into the layers to make sense of the building.
Quite a lot's changed. So we've got one middle room of one large building. So we've got the main room there, a little bit of a room here, and just the edge of one in that section there.
And that's the floor over at the far end, is it there?
It is, yes. It looks like that was demolished, fairly soon after the Abbey was closed, but this part of the building seems to have continued on in occupation. In front, that's actually the edge of the fireplace, sort of sticks into the room, and it's got a lip on it to perhaps catch the ash from falling in. And we're finding large lumps of stone, which elsewhere have been robbed away, but here it's been left.
So those stones there, those architectural fragments are just lying on the floor where they were left 500 years ago.
Yeah, and no one's bothered taking them away. I mean, it's really helped us understand that we've got different phases of use and certainly different lengths of use of the different rooms in this building.
So during the 13th century, the building in the mystery trench was a high-status hall, probably the first Abbot's Lodge, where cooking and fine dining would have taken place. Later, on completion of the new Abbot's Lodge around 1509, part of the building was reused as a workshop, making lead for the abbey windows on site. After the dissolution in 1539, the building was one of the last parts of the monastery to survive. One room was used as a casting area, melting down the abbey's roofing lead into ingots to be sent off-site to the king. As the team finalised their work on the lodge, in the lower end of the trench, a new feature helps clarify the layout of the abbey complex.
In that far corner there, you can just see like a rectangular yellow patch, and that's actually the very end of the late medieval East Range, which came up from the cloister, and we've just clipped the very end of it.
Is that what we have in the other trench over there?
Yeah.
Well, that's great because you have a kind of archaeological link, a stratigraphical link between that trench and this trench.
Absolutely. We can actually measure in now the limit of that set of buildings. But what's really intriguing at this stage now is we've taken away those medieval yard surfaces and we're now down below them and we're beginning to get features appearing.
And among the features are a number of pits. With the disappointment of the oyster pit still fresh in everyone's minds, and with only one day to go, it's all hands on deck to find out if there could be something much earlier within them.
So, if you look in the side there, there's a pit coming down here, and that is cutting another one, and all that's left of it is this little grey splodge there, and then there's a big third one here. So we have 3 intercutting pits, and of course on top of it all is this wall. So we can assume that all these pits are older than the wall. So these could be maybe Anglo-Saxon or Saxo-Norman or something like that. We date them really by what finds we have. There's the finds tray for that pit there, a few bits of bone in there.
The bones, and some seeds found in the pits, will be sent off for radiocarbon dating in the hope that they can find some evidence of early activity in this part of the site. As work on the Abbey comes to a close, there's one more exciting result that's still outstanding.
Over the last couple of weeks, we've been working with Hugh to undertake some more detailed surveys of the Trendle.
It's so exciting to have some more clues about what is up there. It looks like a chapel, but it's a wonderful thought to imagine a building like that towering over the Abbey. Whether there is an earlier Anglo-Saxon building underneath it or whether there is some other kind of structure, I would love to know the answers to that.
John, it's good to see you again. How's it all gone?
Show us what you got.
Back in the finds shed, the radar results from the Trendle are in.
Let me share the screen. So I think you can just see the outline of the structure. If we go a bit deeper into the ground, then in the centre, we're getting a lot of structural debris. So that's collapsed building. And as we go deeper, if I can draw your eye to this is really odd. We don't understand it. It's 5 metres long, 3 metres wide. The top of it is about 1.6 metres down. And it's suggesting a vault.
Well, I wasn't expecting that. And it's definitely not geological.
No. Now, when we've had similar results elsewhere, it has been something like a large vault, a very large family tomb. So the sort of thing I might expect down on the Abbey site itself, but not up on the hill on the Trendle.
Unless, of course, you have a very special person being buried up there at some point.
Yeah. The only way forward, I think, is for Hugh to dig it.
Well,
another trench?
Another trench, perhaps, in the future.
I'll send the bill.
So could this be a chapel, or hermitage, or perhaps even the final resting place of St. Eadwald himself? These results have certainly brought the team a little closer to understanding the monuments that surround the site of the Abbey. And one thing is possible. By repurposing the giant as St. Eadwald, a Christian figure rather than a pagan one, the monks of Cerne inadvertently immortalised him.
Okay. Everybody's, I don't know what you say here, everybody say cheese! Cerne. There we go, and I'll take a few more. These trenches really have paid dividends, haven't they? Both of them have been really, really interesting.
Well, what blew me away in the church trench was we actually found some church. I know that sounds a bit silly, but everywhere else we've dug, you know, in the main cloister complex, the walls are totally gone. We've got walls, and you've seen them, they're whoppers.
Massive.
So massive. They're made of big solid chalk blocks. So we managed to get some walls, and that will help us, you know, really understand the church a bit better. So the real highlight for me is that we can just really recreate and imagine what the church is like.
The early church remains elusive, but it would probably have started life as a more simple construction. Evidence suggests it was built of crude chalk blocks held together without mortar, and perhaps even decorated with Romanesque carvings of animals and mythical beasts lining the eaves. During the 13th century, as the abbey grew in size and wealth, so too did the buildings. The earlier chalk structures disappeared and more ornate ones took their place. Green glazed ridge tiles lined each of the roofs. Shell-speckled Purbeck marble columns decorated the windows and walls, with hamstone mullions and trefoils coloured with bright coral and gilded plasterwork inside. Certainly a breathtaking sight for any visitor to the abbey as they arrived guided by the giant above.
We haven't learnt everything about the site, but that means we'll have to come back and target other areas in the future and answer a different set of questions. I think we need to understand, in better detail what's happening in the earlier period. Yeah, we've got activity, we've got some pits and cut features and whatever, but do we have a very early monastery? Do we have anything pre the monastery? That's stuff we still need to try and sort out.
With another season planned for 2025, the team will return to expand their knowledge of the Abbey site and build on one last discovery from the trenches. A carbonised seed of wheat collected from one of the pits found with just one day to go revealed a post-excavation radiocarbon date from the 11th century, nicely within the date range of the giant.
Such a shock to discover that we knew so little about something so iconic. So many people know about that giant and this place, and yet actually we didn't know very much at all. And until the archaeologists started working, we didn't even know for sure where the abbey was. So it's only through piecing all of these pieces together that we begin to really quite suddenly have a much clearer impression of what was going on in this very famous place.
And so it's time to head to the pub for a celebratory end of dig pint.
Hugh, that's it, and the dig is over. What are your thoughts then? Can we link what's down on the site with the giant or the Trendle at the top of the hill?
Clearly there's a connection and interaction between that monument and our monuments. But I think what we've done is help contextualise the giant. We're not just looking at the giant as a hill figure or just something on its own. It's obviously part of a much wider complex landscape, and that's really important.
Yeah, well, I'll drink to that.
Cheers.
Cheers.